Hello everyone, welcome to Build Fix. It is October 2025 and the scariest thing you do this month should not be choosing parts for a new computer. And that is why I made this series, because building a PC is very fun, but picking the parts can be challenging. Speaking of which, this series is proudly sponsored by PCPartPicker. I have 3 builds for you guys today: entry level, mid-range, top end, and none of them use the 9800X3D.
Excellent!
Today's video is brought to you by the Paul's Hardware store on paulshardware.net, the only official source for Paul's Hardware merchandise. Tantalizing t-shirts, brilliant beer sets, high-quality hoodies, and more, all featuring the classic thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers, or the 8-bit thumbscrew for tasteful and refined viewers who hate curves. New designs are added sporadically and at random, so head over to paulshardware.net and get some of that sweet, sweet merch right now. Or not right now, after you watch the video. Either way. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with the 9800X3D. It's pretty universally accepted as the best CPU for gaming right now. You can check out last month's episode where I did do 9800X3D builds, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start with how BuildFix works. It starts with a community post, so if you're not subscribed to my channel, consider subscribing. That way you'll see this when it goes live. All the builds I'm going over this month were picked from the replies. I'm sorry I'm not diving into a Linux PC yet, but it is in my head. It's wedged in my brain. I'm thinking about it at least. And there's also a somewhat unrelated poll where people can just vote on stuff. Since it's Halloween time, I went with the candy theme. And as I somewhat expected, chocolate is the winner. And I had to pick that one too, because if I'm choosing Halloween candy, I gotta go with the chocolate-based ones. Like the hard candy, even the chewy soft candy, I don't know, it's just all sugar. I like there to be chocolate added with the sugar as well. But even if you combine all 3 of these, chocolate still wins. 2 other quick things to mention before I get to fixing the builds. You might notice that I lean towards AMD these days, and most of my build recommendations are for their current generation platform, AM5. That's not to say that there aren't viable options on the Intel side, but Intel's current generation platform doesn't have a lot of longevity planned for it. You have the current Core Ultra series. They're going to be doing a refresh of that, but the performance for these CPUs, especially if you're focused on gaming, just doesn't match up with the AMD offerings, especially if you're going to go with an X3D CPU. But if you do really want an Intel recommendation, I would say look at the Core Ultra 7 265K. This is widely regarded as the best bang for the buck on the Intel side of things. It's a 20-core processor with 20 threads since Intel did away with hyperthreading. I would say keep an eye out for this CPU at around $260. It has been selling for that much in the past week or so because there was some Amazon Prime sales. I wouldn't pay too much more than that, but if you want an Intel recommendation for me, that is it. Also, as kind of a higher level view of PC hardware as a whole, I've been following GPU prices all year this year, and they have been coming down. GPU pricing is actually not fantastic, but it has at least come down to MSRP or belower. Yes, I just said belower. I guess that's the word now. But since we can't ever have anything nice for like the long term in PC gaming, we have prices for other hardwares going up. Specifically memory, SSD, and hard drive prices have been creeping up. This is apparently due to AI demand, which is frustrating and dumb. But okay, enough exposition. Let's get to the first build. This one was sent by MattyBob12310, and we're looking at a budget range build around 700 gibups or British pounds. And I like that this is an upgrade from a 12-year-old PC of Theseus. Every part has slowly been replaced. Is it a new PC or is it still the old PC? I don't know. But if you're looking for a build in this price range and you want to build on AM5 so you have that upgrade path potential as newer generations of CPUs come out in the next few years, then we have a few important decisions to make, and one of the most impactful in terms of the overall price is going to be the GPU. I like that we've already chosen a Sparkle Titan Arc B580. And apparently this one was purchased for £220. The alternative to this is going to be the AMD Radeon RX 9060 XT. So we'll take a look at that as we go down the list. The remaining parts here I have populated onto a list over on PCPartPicker, including the 7600X CPU, the Noctua NH-U9S CPU cooler, motherboard, memory, the SATA SSDs being carried over from a previous build. I just chose a 1TB model there. And while MattyBob is planning to get the Sparkle Titan Arc B580, I just used PCPartPicker's parametric filter to add the least expensive B580, and right now I'm using US prices where it's coming in at $885, that's without storage. I also had to make a selection for the power supply since that was not listed. But one of the nice features of PCPartPicker is that we can choose different regions for regional pricing, and that includes the UK, where we can see the 7600X is 160, the cooler's about $70, and so on down the list. I guess the power supply I chose is not available over in the UK, but it looks like we are coming in at a little bit over that planned price of 700 gibups. And I just had one of those weird double takes where I refreshed and suddenly something changed. The 7600 price apparently is no longer good anymore, and it just jumped up by like 20 bucks or something. That's okay, prices can change quickly. We will deal with it. I'm gonna hit edit this parts list so we can go down the components, starting with the CPU. If you want to do an AM5 build on a budget, you're probably going to start with the 6-core, and there's pretty much 4 options for your 6 cores here. There are the 8000 series. Those have integrated graphics, and they are viable choices if you're not going to be purchasing a discrete graphics card. But if you are going to be building with a discrete graphics card, I would not consider the 8000 series because they have less cache, and they actually are not going to get as much performance out of your GPU as the other options. So we have the 7600, 7600X, 9600, and 9600X. The non-X versions are going to run at slightly slower speeds, 5.1 gigahertz versus 5.3. However, they are also going to come with a stock cooler that will get you by if you're trying to build on a budget. Since a discrete cooler was also included as part of this parts list, I'm going to go ahead and say probably won't get the 7600 or especially the 9600, which is ridiculously priced at close to $300. That leaves us with the 7600X and the 9600X. There is only about a $10 difference between the two of those, and you do get the newer Zen 5 architecture with the 9600X. So for 10 bucks, I would go ahead and upgrade, so we'll swap that out for the 9600X instead. I would say, as of like 20 minutes ago, my advice would have been different because the 7600X was on sale for $150 and a $34-ish gap there. I'd say stick with the 7600X because it's a better value. Speaking of a better value though, while I love Noctua products in terms of how they're built and their performance, they tend to also be on the pricey side. And for $75, we could actually go with like an all-in-one liquid cooler or something like that. But since we are trying to keep the price down, I'm gonna go ahead and swap out the Noctua cooler, and I know there's like gasps from the Noctua diehards out there, but we're gonna save about 40 bucks by just swapping over to one of Thermalright's many solutions here, and sometimes these can be a little bit overwhelming, but the Phantom Spirit, the Peerless Assassin, these are all excellent performing coolers that only cost around $35. Some have RGB, some do not, so choose the one that meets your preference. I'm gonna go with the Phantom Spirit. I have used this CPU cooler before. It is excellent, can easily keep up with the 9600X, and it can even keep up with like a 9800X 3D if you went that route in the future. For your motherboard, we have an ASRock B850M-XR 2.0. It is a very competitively priced board at closer to $100 and $150. We do have basic motherboard features that you would want. We've got a couple M.2 slots. We've got a USB 3.2 Gen 2 front panel header so you can plug in your Type-C port. We do only have 2 DIMM slots, but with the AM5 platform, going with a 4-stick memory configuration can be more difficult to run, especially at the rated speeds, than a 2-slot setup. So if you're sticking to a budget, this board actually hits all the basic needs for a motherboard. It is micro ATX though, which means when paired with the selected case, the Lian Cool 207, which is a very good case and very competitively priced, and this is a good choice that I'm gonna leave in, but a micro ATX board and a full-size ATX case is gonna leave a gap at the bottom, and that may or may not be concerning to you. And then the other concern might be that ASRock doesn't have the best track record for this current generation of motherboards, specifically with the X3D CPUs. More of them have been dying with ASRock motherboards than would be preferred, a little bit higher than the typical rate. If you upgrade your motherboard to the latest BIOS and you're not running an X3D processor, I'd say you can get away with going with an ASRock board because they do tend to have the best price compared to the features that you get. But if we wanted to consider alternative motherboards that would fill out the ATX form factor and give you a little bit more connectivity as well, and going with the budget chipsets B650 and B850, we have the B650 PG Lightning. I've actually built with this motherboard as well, and as long as it's not burning up an X3D CPU, it works just fine. Beyond that, the prices tend to go up. So I'm actually gonna stick with the original motherboard just for the price savings, but do bear in mind the caveats that I mentioned, and if any of those are important to you, or especially if you're planning to upgrade to maybe an X3D CPU down the line, you might want to reconsider. Okay, I mentioned in the intro that memory and SSD prices are going up, and I've totally noticed that as I've been going over different parts for the builds today. This current memory kit, which is based on the specs that were listed in the comments, which is a Corsair kit that's 6,000 speed or faster with 2 16 gig modules for 32 gigs. That is CAS latency 30 or lower, gets us a almost $160 kit, which is like 60 bucks more than I would typically have expected a memory kit of this caliber to cost if you go back a month or two. So let us modify this and see if we can get something cheaper. We don't necessarily need to go with Corsair. They do make good memory, but there are also other options out there. And honestly, if memory is functional, it doesn't really matter what the manufacturer is. Let's also give ourselves a little bit more breathing room with the CAS latency. We'll go with CL32 versus CL30. And there you go. We immediately have a $60 less option that's still DDR5 6000, 2x16 gigs, and even maintains that CL30 speed. That's available over at B&H. It's a white kit. It might not match as well, but if you're on a budget, I say aesthetics become a secondary or even tertiary concern. But if you do want something that's a bit more matchy-matchy, we've got a Patriot kit here. We've got a Clev kit as well. I'm gonna go with this Silicon Power kit though, just to try to maximize our pricing. Oh wait, that's why it's cheap. Oh no, it's not, I'm sorry. I was immediately thrown a compatibility error because the motherboard, as mentioned, only has 2 DIMM slots, and I now have 2 memory kits. But you shouldn't mix and match memory kits. Even 2 kits that are exactly the same, if you have 2 2-stick kits, can be difficult to run together as a 4-stick kit, which is why I recommend buying a 2-stick kit by itself, and I would lean towards 2-stick configurations on the AM5 platform, or if you're gonna go with 4 sticks, buy a single kit that's all together, because the Expo or XMP settings are gonna be specifically for a 4-stick configuration, whereas your Expo or XMP settings with a 2-stick configuration are made for a 2-stick configuration. And if you're not into going in and messing with memory timings and everything, which is a little bit higher level in terms of PC building prowess, then plugging and playing your XMP settings is going to be the way to go. And even as I mentioned that, I'm coming in here to double check whether this kit has XMP presets or Expo presets. Some kits have both. This one appears to only have XMP. You can plug in XMP settings on an AM5 motherboard. It'll work just fine. Expo settings just go a little bit deeper in terms of like the secondary timings. Okay, so we'll leave that all white kit for people who are a little bit better at going in and tuning memory timings. You could still save some money there. But this Patriot Viper kit does have AMD Expo and XMP. So there we go. I think that's worth an extra $5. All right, speaking of a little bit of extra money, we have a 1 terabyte existing SSD for this build, which you can totally go with, but as I mentioned, the SSD prices are on the upswing. So if you're on the fence about getting an SSD, I would say now is a better time rather than waiting. And just looking at all SSDs with M.2 2280 form factor, we can see that you can still get 2 terabyte options for around $100. We do have a 4 terabyte Silicon Power option for a similar price per gigabyte at least. But I can already see that these have gone up. Again, like going back a month or two, prices for the cheapest 2 terabyte drives are probably closer to the $80 range, maybe $90. So if you're on a super budget, you can get a 1 terabyte drive for around $56 right now. I think 2 terabytes is better in terms of price per gigabyte and value. So we'll drop in the Silicon Power UD90. Not the fastest drive by any stretch of the imagination, but it is more about value here. And from there, the build is pretty much rounded out. Go for the least expensive B580 graphics card. Right now they're selling for their MSRP, which is $250, which isn't great, but they were $300 for quite a while this year. Again, I'm totally happy with this case because it's only around $82. Good case, comes with a couple big fans for intake at the front, so your airflow is taken care of. And then I chose a modest 650 watt power supply for this build because it was only around $57. This is a Rosewell unit. And with a shout out and due credit to the Zach Tech Tips Discord community, they're maintaining this PSU tier list. And I will link this in the video's description so you can take a look at all of the various PSUs on the market and their ratings. You basically want to go with a C or better rating. Of course, there are B and A ratings too. Those units tend to be a little bit more on the expensive side. But you want a unit with a decent enough rating on that list, and then you want a wattage that goes along with the chosen graphics card that you're going with. For a B580, you can actually get by with 550 or 600 watts. Going 50 to 100 watts over that gives you a little bit more breathing room. So here we have a 650 watt unit. It's 80 plus bronze certified. And while it is not the best PSU, especially from this Rosewell grouping, it's got a C rating. That's good enough for this kind of build. The final recommendation I would make for this build would be to take a look at pricing for the 9060 XT. Remember, it comes in 2 flavors. You have 8 gig versions and you have 16 gig versions. If you want to jump up to that 16 gig variant, you're going to have to pay $350. That's $100 more than the B580. So it may or may not be worth it to you, but the 9060 XT does have a little bit better pure rasterization performance than the B580, and the cheapest one currently available is $270. So take a look at that. Look at the games you actually are playing or planning to play and look for reviews that include benchmarks of that specific game or those specific games, comparing the 9060 XT to the B580. That will help you better narrow down your decision to actually benefit you and the games that you're planning to play with your gaming PC. All right, so there are my changes and things to keep in mind for Matty Bob's build, and the updated price is $922. That does include storage this time around. I'm just curious if I switch this over to UK, if the price is much different there. Well, it's up to $800. It did increase a little bit, but that is with a more expensive CPU, and that is with the addition of a 2TB NVMe SSD, which accounts for close to 100 of those gigabytes. And either way, the power supply price isn't being taken into account either. All right, as I often do, I think I've spent too much time on the first build, so I'm gonna try to plow through the next two a little bit faster. This next one's from keepthattomyself with a 7800X3D build. And part of the reason I chose this one, there were actually several 7800X3D builds requests or people who were planning to build with that CPU this month. And I think that's because the price has come way down on that. So I think it's a really good bang for the buck at this point in time because you get current gen AM5, you get X3D performance. It's a little bit behind the 9800X3D for sure. But also, I'm gonna say this right up front, most of the rest of the parts that were picked here are all good. So I don't have a lot of changes to make with this build, but for anyone who is looking for a system around, I would say the $1,400 to $1,800 or $1,900 price range, this is a really solid foundation for that. And then there are a few parts you can swap out here and there to tune it for your needs. So here's the parts list as translated over to PCPartPicker. And right now we're coming in at $1,800. And I must have just chosen the poor time to shoot this because the 7800X3D was very cheap. Let's hit edit here so we can take a closer look. $375, it was, man. We're gonna take advantage of PCPartPicker's price history here. Look at the price like last week at Walmart, and there were some other places too, had it for as low as $320. Amazon also had it down closer to $300 than $350. Note that Amazon pricing is not included in the history graphs. I don't know why. I'm guessing maybe Amazon doesn't like that or something. So I'm quickly jumping over to Camel, where Amazon price history is tracked. And we can see, yeah, $320. They had it for the same price as Walmart. It's only been that cheap like once before. Right, so it seems like Amazon must have sold out of their stock, so the price that is being listed now is probably from a third-party seller. Okay, that slightly deflates my point, but I do want to mention to people that it has sold for $320, so if you can find it for less than $350, I would say it's still a very solid choice. And hopefully we'll see some more stock come back in, and maybe those sales will bounce back as we get closer to Black Friday. For CPU cooler, once again, we have a thermal right option here. This one is the Peerless Assassin 120 Digital ARGB, which includes a readout on top for showing your CPU and GPU like temperature and load. If this was selling for 60 or 70 bucks, I'd be like, that's too much money. And that's not a lot of extra, but this is only $10 more than the non-digital version. So if you keep your computer in a location where you can quickly glance at that information, perhaps that is a value for you. And since this was chosen by Keep That To Myself, I'm gonna go ahead and leave it in there. We also have an MSI Mag X870 Tomahawk motherboard for $260. This is a very solid all-around motherboard that represents like a step up from the more entry-level AM5 boards that are in the $150 to $200 price range. And it does have some nice features like added M.2 slots, better power delivery. It's got a digital readout for debugging. That's always really helpful. And it has integrated Wi-Fi, which is convenient too. The only thing I'd really suggest here is to maybe keep an eye out on X670E, X670, and X870E motherboards that are within the same price range. The X870E variant of the Tomahawk Wi-Fi is about $100 more, which I'd say is not quite worth it. But the E chipset boards have a double chipset, which gives you more connectivity. And if that's something that's important to you, then that might be worth upgrading to. That said, I'm gonna leave this board as is. And in fact, as I mentioned at the beginning of this build, I'm gonna leave pretty much everything as is because I felt like these were all good choices. A 32 gig memory kit, DDR5 6000, maybe 6200 to 6400 is the way to go. Keep your CAS latency as low as possible. This isn't the best price, but with memory prices going up, this is still very reasonable, and G.Skill is a solid memory manufacturer. Team Group makes some good entry-level SSDs, and likewise, this is a 2TB model for $125. What the heck, I'll change something. I'll make a slight change here. We can get a slightly better 2TB SSD price. And just like with the last build, kind of the best bang for the buck down in the budget range here would be Silicon Power UD90. Patriot P400 would also be just fine here. From there, the prices go up a little bit. But again, just to keep things simple, we'll go with the Silicon Power. And then finishing things out, we had the 5070 Ti 16 gig at its MSRP of $750. I would not pay more than $750 for a 5070 Ti. That said, if you're looking to save a little bit of money, right now we're at just over $1,800 for the total cost of this build. You could save around $200-ish by going with the 5070 instead of a 5070 Ti. You will only have 12 gigs of VRAM VRAM instead of 16, and you also lose a little bit of raw performance. And then I would also recommend considering your AMD alternatives, the Radeon RX 9070, which has been at its MSRP of $550 right now. It's a little bit above that at $560. And then the 9070 XT, which has become, was slightly easier to recommend when it came down to $600. Cheapest one is $613, and that one's out of stock. So between these, for like $670-ish, I would say just go with 5070 Ti. But if you can spot a RX 9070 XT 16 gig at around $600, that's well worth considering as well. And I guess for this one, we'd have to hit auto notify and then cross our fingers. Oh, one last note from Keep That To Myself. The PC is for a teenager as a reward for finishing his Eagle Scout. I just wanted to say, well done. Like, that's tough. And if I remember, I think this is the right way to do the Scout hand signal, and then you're supposed to say something about how duty is important. I don't know, I didn't really make it much past Webelow. Okay, our third build is a high-end build coming from archibricks, upgrading from an i7 11700 and a 3080. So this is gonna be a pretty decent upgrade. And we're going for something that can run render software, CAD programs, heavy architectural rendering, but also white. So we're considering aesthetics, we're considering capabilities for a high-end build. I'm gonna go ahead with this as a AM5 9950X3D build, but take a look at Threadripper. It is quite a big step up in price, but if you actually need the I/O of Threadripper, look at Threadripper with the actual CAD programs you run and see if it's actually gonna benefit you. That said, for most people, a 16-core, 32-thread 9950X3D is going to be an excellent crossover between both getting work done and also you have the X3D performance for gaming too. Here are the rest of the parts on the list, and we have a couple 1440p 120 Hz monitors for the gaming as well. So I would say a 5070 Ti should be able to handle that easily. And then here are the rest of the parts with the 9950X3D, the CPU cooler, which I had to plug in because it wasn't listed on PCPartPicker. And then lots more high-end components. We are coming in at less than 4,000, so you do have a little bit of wiggle room there. We're at 3,200 right now. So starting from the top, if you're not thinking about Threadripper, the 9950X3D is totally the way to go here. Your all-in-one liquid cooler is the Kraken Elite 420 RGB from NZXT. This is a beast of a cooler because it's 420 millimeters. It is also a beast of a price at $335 stinking dollars. So this is gonna be the first component here that I say, no, I would not pay $350 for this. I mean, sure, it's got like a display on it, and it is a pretty white cooler. Not worth that much money though. I would like to give a shout out to Michael over at Hardware Canucks, who just recently did a very exhaustive bit of testing on a bunch of different 360 millimeter all-in-one liquid coolers. This video has so much depth to it and so much testing. So if you are looking for an all-in-one liquid cooler and you're like, how much does it actually benefit me? This video has so much data on it, which includes stuff like fan speed, noise generation. He was testing a 9800 X3D, but checking out the full load temperatures, noise normalized to 32 decibels. We have like 7 or 8 degrees of a temperature difference there. And I mean, specifically for gaming loads, there's practically no difference. So this is what I'm saying. There are 360 millimeter all-in-one liquid coolers that sell for $70, $80, $90, and there's others that sell for $200 or $300. I don't think that extra $100 to $200 gets you a whole lot unless you really want an LCD screen. And if you're gonna do that, just look at individual LCD screens that you can get and like stick to the actual outside of your case or something where you'll actually see it more often than having to like lean over and peek into wherever your computer is. Anyway, that video is linked in the video's description. So based on Michael's results, I've done a very quick search, and I like Fantex. They make good products. They have their Glacier 1 360, which should be $90. I guess that is after rebate, but it does have that nice all-white finish. So we'll go ahead and drop the price by $225 to $235, depending on whether or not you can get that at the listed price. And we're gonna move on. The Gigabyte X870E, he mentioned the new X3D boards. There's a series of X3D specific motherboards that Gigabyte just launched. And here I want to point out like what is useful in a motherboard or worth spending more money on versus what is not. These motherboards have AI tuning, an AI-powered performance breakthrough to enable users and blah, blah, blah. This is marketing fluff. As far as I can tell, like these boards have all this AI marketing it makes it seem Like you're running AI locally on the motherboard and then the AI is like overclocking stuff for you or trying to like eke a little bit more performance out of your X3D CPU. I'm not sure that's exactly how it works though. I haven't been able to like track down the specific implementation of AI with this motherboard, but my guess is that they're using some AI model training on their side, and then they're taking that data to use to update the UEFI or the BIOS. I don't think it's actually doing anything with the AI. So the benefits of this motherboard are going to be the fact that it's got 16+2+2 phase VRM. Depending on which version you go with, the higher end boards have 18+2+2. So if you are going to be overclocking, that is possibly something you might consider. If you're not going to overclock, higher end VRMs really don't do much for you. You might have a slightly better PCI Express configuration in terms of the number of PCIe 5.0 slots that you have, but what often happens with additional PCIe 5.0 slots is that it's taking 8 of the 16 lanes for your top GPU slot and then branching those off for 2 more 4x slots for your PCIe Gen 5 drives. Going from by 16 to by 8 for your GPU typically doesn't impact performance that much, so that is a reasonable trade-off if you need lots of fast storage on your motherboard. But remember, no motherboard is going to suddenly give you more PCI Express lanes from the CPU. CPU is still limited to 28. 4 of those go to your chipsets, and then 24 can go to PCI Express slots and M.2 slots. 16 of those usually go to the top slot for the GPU, and then the others can branch out in various ways. A lot of that configuration is up to the motherboard manufacturer. I guess what I'm trying to say here is spending an extra $100, $200, $300 for the higher end motherboard is probably not going to give you that much. And their claims of 25% gaming uplift, I'm also very skeptical of. I would imagine that's very situational. And since you're going with the 9950X3D CPU, which has 2 CCDs, one 8-core without X3D, one 8-core with X3D, the way these turbo modes often work to get a little bit more gaming performance will completely disable the CCD without X3D, and then we'll often take the CCD that does have X3D and turn off hyperthreading, giving you 8 cores and 8 threads instead of 8 cores and 16 threads. Now, if you can quickly toggle back and forth between those, maybe you can turn on X3D mode for gaming and then turn it off when you're doing your CAD stuff. But if you're not the type to go in and be adjusting those things on the fly depending on your use, you might want to just ignore these X3D OC modes completely and consider going with a motherboard that is like $100 less expensive, because Gigabyte already has Aorus Elite Wi-Fi motherboards, even with the white ice finish. And this board has a nice range of features, and it's, like I said, $100 cheaper. So I'm gonna go with that one. Let's talk about your memory next. Man, this video is getting long. My apologies. All right, so once again, if we go with Corsair, we want a white finish, and we want your 96 gig setup. I highly recommend going with 2x48 gigs rather than 4x24 gigs. Especially don't try to get 2 separate 2x24 gig kits and install them all on the same system, unless you're really good at memory overclocking and going in and tuning those settings, which many people are not. If you have your sights set on Corsair's Dominator Titaniums, you're gonna have to pay the price for it. The cheapest kit that matches these specs is $440, going up to $500 if you want to go with CL30. But even the less expensive CL32 kit, since it goes up to DDR5 6600, has slightly better latency, but you might not be able to get this kit running at DDR5 6600. And if you go up to DDR5 6600, it might adjust your memory ratio from 1:1 to 1:2. As with many things with PC building, if you go to higher speeds, sometimes it has to adjust the ratio. And if you have to go from 1:1 to 1:2 ratio between your DDR5 memory and the memory controller, it's actually going to hurt your gaming performance. That is why the sweet spot for AM5 is DDR5 6000. You can sometimes get away with 6200 or 6400 and still maintain that 1:1 ratio. But that is, again, just something to consider if you're looking at higher end memory, and especially if you're planning on paying a lot for memory that's rated for higher speeds. To save $100+, all I did was look for 6000 or faster speed. That's not necessarily all Corsair. We're still sticking with a white finish. So I wanted to look and see if there was, a way we could save $100 or so by going with a 6000 speed or better memory, a 2x48 gig kit. Still white, but not sticking with Corsair memory only. There's a Patriot kit that's only $320, but that also is CL42, so that drops latency from 10 nanoseconds down to 14. Not quite sure if that is worth the trade-off, so if you really are trying to save some money with this aspect of the build, you would probably want to go with a 2x32 gig kit, and we have compatible kits that are down in the $215 to $250 range. Didn't seem like there were many 4x32 gig kit options. I was kind of hoping that might be a thing to get you more memory for the same or less price. But okay, I'm kind of running out of options here without compromising too much on your requests. So after all that explanation, I'm gonna leave this kit as is, because if you want all those parameters, it looks like this is possibly your best choice. And a lot of memory is something that is highly desirable for a workstation, which is also probably why it's expensive. All right, I am so out of time here, so I'm gonna run down the rest of these really quickly. I set you up with a 2 terabyte SSD. I went with the $120 version because it's gigabyte, so it kind of matches the rest of your components. This one also has a dedicated cache, and I'm not 100% sure in terms of the software you're using, what kind of benefit it's gonna get out of faster storage, but a dedicated cache is something that can speed up a drive, even with a Gen 4 drive, and this one is still coming in at only $120 or so. Since we are well below your expected price of $4,000, this is where I would say you should add more stuff. 2 terabyte drives, 4 terabyte drives. You can go crazy with storage, and again, I'd recommend buying now rather than waiting. Rounding things out, we have a Gigabyte Aero OC RTX 5070 Ti. It's $850. That's about $100 more than a typical 5070 Ti, but you already have it, so there's not a whole lot of point in me recommending something else. But for anyone else who's looking at this build and considering something similar, find a $750 5070 Ti. The last two components are the Haven HS420, which is a very good case. It is expensive, but for this caliber of build, and especially for the aesthetic considerations that you are clearly taking into account, it's a solid case. Very unique design. I thought they did a great job with this. I have a video on the HS420. I had the black and white version, so I will not fault you there. Finally, for our power supply, I wanted a white 1000 watt model to make sure you're capable of handling a 5070 Ti or a lot of extra storage, additional stuff you might drop into a workstation system like this. Vetru does not have a lot of entries on the PSU tier list, but they are very highly rated. We got an A and a B+, so either way you go, you're totally good, and that's only about $120 too. So there we have it, total build coming in at less than $3,000, maintaining most of the aesthetic considerations that you had in mind, and that, at long last, is going to wrap it up for this episode of Build Fix. I feel like I got a little long-winded on this one, but hopefully I've offered some advice that helps you guys out, whether you're one of the 3 builds that I selected or you're just looking for advice on building your own system. If you guys have any feedback for me, leave that in the comments section down below. Down in the description, I'll post links to these builds. A big thank you to PCPartPicker for sponsoring this series, and then you can also check out my store at paulshardware.net, where we have shirts and mugs and pint glasses, lots of high quality merchandise that really helps support the channel. Thank you guys once again for watching. We'll see you all in the next one.